Getting stories from the edge where the healing begins.
Welcome to another edition of the Old Paratrooper podcast, a podcast where we talk to a wide variety of guests from all walks of life with their amazing stories. If you haven't already, please go to the YouTube channel and the Instagram channel and give me a follow. I really, really appreciate it. It helps massively in getting the messages out there. Today's guest is a little bit different. Not along with the life stories, we kind of like to get stuck into kind of things that are out there at the minute. PTSD, ADHD, that kind of stuff, obviously, because these topics are massively important. Without further ado, mental health nurse who specialises in ADHD, Amanda Joynson-Burkert. How you doing? All right?
Good, thank you. Are you okay?
I am good. I managed to do that without getting all my words mixed up and everything else. So I'm really proud of myself. So that was good. No, thanks for taking the time to come on. I really, really appreciate it. It's a kind of topic that obviously is close to my heart, obviously close to yours. It's your profession. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to come on. I really appreciate it.
It's fine. I think it's really important that we do bring attention to ADHD at the minute, to be honest, Chris.
Yeah, it does. We'll move on to it, how it kind of is. It's a big topic at the minute. And we'll come on to the ins and outs, why it's so big at the minute and stuff like that as we go on. But before we get into it, I'd just like to get a bit of a background about yourself and kind of what led you down that path into the, your chosen field and the work you do now. So yeah, over to you.
So I'm a mental health nurse. I've got experience in high secure settings, CAMHS crisis team. To be fair, the reason what led me to ADHD is because when I went into mental health nursing, I had no interest in ADHD. What I thought ADHD was just naughty schoolboys years ago. I didn't really consider it, I didn't acknowledge it, if I'm being completely honest. But the more I've been in secure settings, inpatients, the more you see that people struggle a lot with ADHD and it gets misdiagnosed or it'll be treated for something else. ADHD it can be a positive in someone's life, but Chris, it can also ruin people's lives. And people have the kind of stigma of everyone's got ADHD. So the reason I've come into ADHD is my husband's got a diagnosis of ADHD. And our relationship was really turbulent, I'd say, at one point. To be fair, it's quite difficult for someone to not have ADHD to be with someone who's got ADHD because you're so worlds apart in how you think, how your brain works. So that is why I come into ADHD. How I got into it is I sent an email to a psychiatrist on Rodney Street. I wrote the email, I deleted it. I'd done this for a few weeks. And I sent him an email and I just said, how'd you get into ADHD? Because all the courses, they're non-accredited, all the coaching courses, not accredited in ADHD because it's still, although it's been here for years, it's still highly researched. We don't know exactly what's going on. And now the psychiatrist sent me an email back saying, can I have your details and I'll pass it on? Anyway, thought nothing of it. So Takeda make ADHD medication. Now they actually got in touch with me from the psychiatrist. They taught me one-to-one every week for a couple of months about ADHD, how it affects people, etc., etc. And then from that's when I found it's like my passion then. And then I've gone into ADHD assessing. From that journey, I also started seeing signs in my son, who's now 19. He can't keep a job. On paper, you'd think, oh, it's just a tearaway. But now I know about ADHD. I'm very aware of it. And with Bradley as well, my husband, to try and put things in place. So that's why I've come to ADHD and I really do enjoy it.
No, that's good. And I think sometimes it takes something, that kind of impacts you directly to say, you know what, I want to do something about that. And with myself kind of figuring out that I've kind of got it undiagnosed, I'm almost honest about that. But, I kind of want to raise awareness because I think once you understand it and the people around you understand it, you suddenly become, for me, it was like a light bulb moment, working out kind of at the ins and outs. But yeah, so for anyone that doesn't have an understanding of ADHD and that, could you mind just giving a brief kind of outline of what it is?
Yeah, of course. So ADHD, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it's not a mental health condition and it's not a learning disability either. So in ADHD, it's more your dopamine levels are low, your noradrenaline is low. So the front part of your brain, it's the prefrontal cortex, and that's where you've got your executive dysfunction, where you make decisions, prioritize, um, management, timekeeping, things like that. So because your dopamine is consistently low, they don't work as well as the average person, and that's why they can appear as chaotic. It can affect them keeping jobs. They make impulsive behaviours, which could cause problems with the police, etc. Things like that. You can get fired a lot from work. It affects all domains of your life. I just want to bring up quickly though, Chris. So, what I really wanted to speak about as well is a lot of people who I see in my day-to-day job, they always say, I didn't come forward a long time ago because everyone's got ADHD, and they look at people and think, well, how can you do it? And you say you've got ADHD, but yeah, I'm struggling to do day-to-day life. They can't do a to-do list, they can't make priorities, they can't make decisions. The reason social media is to blame for it, to be fair. Now, social media is brilliant and it's also negative. So when people put on social media about ADHD traits, every single person in the world can relate to it. For example, I've not got ADHD. If I'm in a stressful environment, if I'm having a low mood or I'm feeling anxious, that's when my executive dysfunction will go, and then I start having ADHD like symptoms for a short period of time. Once the stress is gone, I go back to normal. Now, someone with ADHD, they've got these struggles consistently. So it's very unfair when everyone's saying everyone's got ADHD. It's not the case, and it's unfair on people who are genuinely struggling day to day because their feelings are dismissed as in, but why can't I do it then if I'm watching you live a normal type life, but yet they can't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, there seems to be a lot of self-diagnosis. And I know I'm
Yeah.
being a bit contradicting in kind of me saying that, but I did go down the route, which we'll come on to diagnosis and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff later, how difficult it is sometimes to get a
Yeah.
diagnosis and stuff, and how long it takes. For
Yeah.
me, I did a load of questionnaires. I answered them as honestly as I could. I did several. They all came back. And the people that know me, they're like, it was no surprise. I was a hyperactive kid. I was suspended from school. I was always labelled the naughty kid. And this has gone on, jobs I've taken, holding
Yeah.
down, all that kind of stuff you've just mentioned. So
Yeah.
I suppose what I want to, an important thing, and what I'd like to know is, are you born with it? Or is it something you kind of that happen that can bring on like ADHD through maybe childhood trauma or something like that?
So from the research we've got currently, you're born with ADHD,
Okay.
and there's a bit of confusion around. So some people can not have any traits, and then they become 17, 18, all of a sudden these symptoms are apparent, they amplify. This is where people say, but you haven't had it when you were younger. For someone who's had an upbringing of good structure, for example, you've got a child, parents are there, they've got the scaffolding around them, they do everything for them, they pack the bags for school, they make sure they've got everything. They literally, the child doesn't even do a household chore. ADHD symptoms won't show. As soon as they get a bit of independence and the scaffolding is removed, whether it's by a bar at a time or the whole scaffold, that's when these symptoms will become present. And then, because not many people are aware about this, for example, some parents may not take the child to see the GP because they think, but we haven't had it, and it is part of the criteria that you must have symptoms before the age of 12. This will happen, and then it gets a bit messy because then the child will decide they're lazy or they've got low self-esteem because everything they're doing is struggling. And some people can say, but it's because your parents have done everything for you your whole life. Now, that's not the case. Even if they've never done it for you, you would have struggles then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically, inadvertently, the symptoms are being masked by someone sort of
100%, yeah.
doing the stuff with you. That's interesting because I did read some research that they kind of trauma can bring it on, and some sort of instance of childhood trauma. But obviously, that's probably still in
No,
its early research.
so where you mentioned the rating scales before, that you filled out about ADHD. So you do all the forms, and then the reason you have the assessment is because the clinician needs to make sure, is this childhood trauma? Is this PTSD? PTSD, anxiety, depression, they all mimic ADHD. So when you're speaking to the patient, it's to make sure that none of these are present and there is actually signs of this ADHD throughout the life. What I
Yeah,
did want to speak to you about, it's a bit going off topic. People who have unmanaged ADHD, if they've got a good structured environment, they notice that they can cope a little bit easier, they can manage a bit easier. If they're in a stressful situation, or for example, they're in a chaotic environment, messy room, for example, the symptoms amplify. Now, the reason I was so interested as well about this podcast is because it's quite military. A lot of people who have unmanaged ADHD, they go in the military because of the structure, the discipline. So they go into the military for this. Now, that would mask ADHD until, for example, they're either medically discharged or they leave the army. As soon as they go into civilian life and they've got to make their own decisions, pay their own bills, be with the wife, things like that, that's when these ADHD symptoms will completely amplify. And then this is where there's a crossover between PTSD and ADHD.
okay, I get that makes sense because I personally can relate there to what you're saying because I went about
Yeah,
7 years ago. I went to the doctors thinking I had anxiety and depression because of these waves of
yeah,
mood swings and stuff, and they wanted to prescribe me straight away with antidepressants within 30 seconds. And I was like,
yeah,
"Well, I'm not convinced." So that's when I came away and did all the research, and
yeah,
everything points towards what
yeah,
we've kind of said.
yeah,
My job choices as well. I've only ever had structured jobs, never civilian jobs. Fire service, Iraq, working
yeah,
for close to in military. So yeah, I get that. So kind of how
yeah.
does ADHD affect? I know you've touched on it there, but like people on a day-to-day life, i.e., work, is it just kind of task prioritizing and things like concentration?
So concentration, low motivation, mundane tasks, things like that, timekeeping, time blindness, organisation, things like that. Also, you've got the hyperactivity side, so it's where on the go consistently, the mind won't shut down. It's also impulsive behaviours, impulsive spending, speaking over people, risky behaviours. They'll do a behaviour and they've got no time to think of a consequence until they've done the behaviour. So you've
Yeah,
got all these. It's also emotional dysregulation. They struggle with mood swings. People with ADHD as well, if it's unmanaged, can struggle significantly in keeping communication. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So it can cause problems in relationships, friendships, because people feel like they don't care when really they love them dearly, but they just forget that they exist until something prompts them.
yeah. No, I get that. That kind of leads me on really to my next question. How, what sort of someone that dealing with being in a relationship. I mean, my partner's been absolutely fantastic in helping me and doing her own research in realizing kind of the way my brain works. So kind of what sort of tips would you give to people that are a partner to someone with ADHD?
Yeah, to be fair, from my own personal experience, it's hard because I can sit here and say, well, you should give them people with ADHD space, the mind works different, etc., etc. But when you're in the situation, it is quite difficult. For example, I love my husband dearly, be absolutely devastated if we wasn't together. But there's times like we could sit down to watch the TV and I'm getting seasick because the couch is like moving. We stop at traffic lights in the car and I feel like the car's bouncing, where he's fidgeting. I'm like, I can't deal with this. So then I end up getting anxiety because it's just like, oh, sometimes it can be a case of if you've got ADHD, you can find that you rely a lot on your partner in terms of for structure, to remind you about appointments, just day to day tasks. That can be quite hard as well. But one tip advice I would say is you just need to be kind to each other. And it's easy for me to say that because me and Bradley do have struggles sometimes around this. But even if you just take space or the person who's not got ADHD to read up on it, just so you can see that it's not they don't love you or it's towards you or anything like that, or excuse me language, they're not taking the piss.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I relate to everything there because it's
Yeah,
easy. It's easy to let someone just kind of do everything for you, and then it has to be pointed out. And it's not. it's not like, I don't think it's from a lazy. I don't feel like I'm a lazy person at all. In fact, I'm the opposite. But if someone
Yeah,
takes charge, I will let them do it, and
yeah,
it's just because it's easier for me for someone else running the show.
yeah,
The appointment thing is absolutely holidays and appointments,
yeah,
and it's not just one thing. Like you say, I'm sure there's a lot of blokes out there where their missus literally tells them, right, there's your suitcase, pack it, we're going on holiday, I've done the hotel and everything else. But that's
y-
just one of the things. Like, I find that stuff really difficult to do,
yeah,
and I can go to a house fire in the middle of the night and pull casualties out of a house fire and not think two things about it. I enjoy it.
yeah,
I not enjoy it, that's the wrong word, but I do it without a second. For planning, paying sort of my bills and structuring how I manage finances,
yeah,
it causes me more stress than I know what to do with. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Also, as well, what we do see a lot of, so where you've just mentioned about you're not lazy. So people with ADHD, especially if it's unmanaged, really, they have low dopamine. So that means they struggle so much to get up and actually do it, and then it becomes task paralysis. So you've got a task to do, and you're thinking about it, you want to do it, but your body just physically won't let you do it. That can cause commotion in your marriage kind of thing, because it can come across as you're just being lazy or you just want the other person to do it, when in reality it's because you've got low dopamine. So where you've just mentioned about in a crisis, so, for example, that's a massive positive for people with ADHD is, so you've got dopamine levels. This is a person who's not got ADHD. This is a person who has. So they're your normal levels, dopamine. ADHD, it's lower. So when you're in, just say for example, a crisis, your levels raise. So the person who's not got ADHD, they go in fight or flight. They can't make decisions. Their executive dysfunction then goes. Now the person with ADHD, they end up baseline. They excel then because the dopamine levels are normal. They make decisions, they excel, they know what to do, and that's the reason for it.
Yeah, I have this clarity when I'm in, and I have over the years been involved in all sorts of situations, but it's almost like
Yeah,
I've got this clarity and awareness of what's going on around me when people tend to be losing their heads.
yeah,
And it's weird, but that kind of really does kind of explain it, doesn't it? It's,
yeah. So with us talking about the positives as well, so you've also got people with ADHD are brilliant problem solvers, very creative. If there's an issue, they'll come up with 100 ways to resolve it. They're very chatty, humorous. There's a lot of positives. So if ADHD was to be managed, it's really good. There's a lot of strengths that will carry you through life. Maybe we're to the point of the open businesses that no one else thinks about kind of thing, because you think outside the box. So it's not all negative with ADHD.
yeah, no, well, not, that's a really sort of useful point. It's not all doom and gloom, there are kind of positive,
Yeah,
and I almost now knowing myself, I like the way my brain works because of
yeah,
which come on to the hyper focus and the stuff, how you make things
yeah,
work when you become, but at the same time, the negative, if I'm not interested, the mundane task, which you'll relate to with your partner, it's like
yeah,
DIY. I've got no interest, so you're barking up the wrong tree to try
yeah,
and get me interested in it or
yeah.
anything, you know.
No,
Um,
prime example. Sorry to interrupt you then. Hence being on ADHD thing and I'm interrupting. What I was going to say then, Chris, so for example, before I started doing all the ADHD, like I'd ask my husband, will you do this or we meant to be do something, and he wouldn't do it, and I'd be like, you're just relying on me to do it kind of thing. But then he'd pick his golf bag up and he'd go to golf, and it's like, oh, but you're okay to go to golf, but you won't do this one task. That also comes from if it's an interest or it's something that excites you, your dopamine levels will rise, and then you can get up and you can do it. So again, it's not a case of people with ADHD can pick and choose. It's what your body will let you do and not let you do because of the transmitters in your brain.
yeah, no, it's got I fascinating stuff because it's all kind of explaining, and especially I'm hoping there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of people that will watch this and relate to what you're saying, and just to have it
Yeah,
explained, because again, with ADHD, trying to read about it and learn about it
yeah,
is almost like too much hard work because it doesn't interest us. I've tried to be
yeah,
interested in it and I've tried, but if my fiance can tell me about it, which she does. She reads about it and tells me. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I think social media is good for it as well, because there's a lot of
100%.
stuff out there that kind of talks about it, and it's easy to watch. And
Yeah.
then on TikTok and all the other stuff. So that kind of leads me on to, there seems to be a lot of self-diagnosis of AD. Seems to be all over social media.
Yeah.
What's the path to getting an official diagnosis? Because it seems to be a little bit difficult. So can you point people in the kind of right direction, and what
Yeah.
the path would possibly be for someone that thinks they may have?
So we'll talk about the NHS way first. So what people are best doing is go and speak to your GP, because as I said before, a lot of other mental health disorders do mimic ADHD. Then you've got the forms you were speaking about before. So you do your forms, and then if you meet the criteria for the forms, the rating scales, then you'd go on the waiting list then to see an ADHD specialist. And then that's when they do, it's either 60 minutes or 90 minutes. And then you talk about when you were born, did your mum smoke? Was there any complications? You go right through school, through occupational history, relationships, drugs, alcohol, anything that can cause trauma. We need to make sure that this is nothing mimicking, because if, for example, just say you come to the ADHD assessment, but it's PTSD that you've got, not ADHD. So then if a GP, for example, which would never happen, just saying this in a scenario, if you was given ADHD medication, which is first line stimulants, and you've got PTSD, not ADHD, you would end up a lot worse, because the stimulants would amplify hyperarousal, hypervigilance, so then it'd do no good. So that's the main reason of why it's so important that you have a proper assessment. Where we mentioned before about everyone's got ADHD, if everyone went for an assessment, it would be the minority that got diagnosed.
Well, it's probably kind of explains a lot. So there's probably a lot of cases out there it's not ADHD, and it could be. That's
Yeah,
really interesting, actually. Again, with the veterans and that, because I feel like the military seems to attract people, but then there'd be
yeah,
a lot of sort of
yeah,
confusion. What is the kind of issue? Okay, that's interesting.
yeah.
So,
Can I just make this one point before we move on? So with the social media, it is brilliant for ADHD, but I just wish it was more precise and specific, and so that people can read and think, but my ADHD like symptoms are situational. They come and go. It's not consistently, because that's where I find it's unfair on the people who do have ADHD, because they do have significant struggles. And it's not nice if you speak to someone about these struggles, and then all of a sudden that person says, "Oh, everyone's got ADHD, don't worry about it." Then they won't seek diagnosis then, and it's just a lifelong struggle.
yeah, no, it is. I get where you're coming from. So, so it doesn't matter how many times we kind of tell people, there are some people that will never ever go for a diagnosis for it. I'm probably a prime example, and I'm getting to a point now, and obviously talking to you and talking to your partner recently, how we kind of
Yeah.
got it. I'm more inclined now to go down that route, but in the meantime, because you're still going to get the people that won't go, how do they understand themselves better if they think they have ADHD, and sort of help them cope with it without the diagnosis? Would you say the diagnosis is that important? Even saying that, we're not going to get people, you're still going to get those people that won't go for the
Yeah,
diagnosis. So how do they kind
100%.
of figure it out?
Yeah, no, 100%, Chris. So the people who don't want to get diagnosed, I would definitely say if they do feel they have it and they don't want to get diagnosed, just start adding coping mechanisms, more sleep hygiene, provide a good structure in your life, minimize stress, chaos, things like that, because it does make a difference. I personally feel you need the diagnosis. Now, it's not, again, this is social media, the label. The diagnosis is not a label. It helps you to see past behaviours, people around you can understand you. Medication is massive, and I do know that we will talk about the stigma around medication as well, because there's a lot said around the medication. Someone who's got a diagnosis, if they get the right help in place, their quality of life can change for the better. So why struggle when you don't really have to, kind of thing? You can improve.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and I know there'll be others out there that think the same. It's like, having come to terms and spent the last 7 or 8 years or longer, my whole life figuring out how my brain works now, I'm fairly comfortable with that. I know when I'm on a low, I know when I'm on a high, I know when I'm manic, I know when you know what I mean? Well, I know when I'm hyper
Yeah.
focused. So medication for me has always been, I don't want to take the medication because I don't want it to change me. But having the conversation with your partner recently, he was like, it's gave him this clarity that he's gone on now. And I think, if I'm sure he won't mind me
Yeah.
mentioning, he's
No,
done
of course.
he's able to focus on a degree where he would never have been able to focus
Yeah.
on that before. So that's what I want to ask you about. How does the medication work? How does it, because again, I saw it a bit like an antidepressant kind of thing where it will just put you on a level where you're not happy, you're not sad, you just kind of one mood. And I don't
Yeah.
think I'm speaking out of turn in saying I don't want to be like that. I can't think of anything worse than not having the highs. I'll deal with the highs because I like them, but the
Yeah.
lows,
Yeah.
it's, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Can I just say, Chris, that everything that I'm saying on this podcast today, it's just educational. So when we speak about medication and things, I don't want no one to change the medication or anything, or if anyone feels what we're talking about, it's important to go and see the GP. Don't self-diagnose, don't do anything for yourself kind of thing. So
Absolutely.
the medication is first line medication for ADHD is a stimulant. So what it does is that raises the dopamine in your brain. So you'll be able to focus more, you'll be able to prioritize. So, when people speak over people or they do impulsive behaviours, you'll have that split second beforehand. So it can stop you from doing the risky behaviours. It can also stop you from doing substance misuse because you don't feel erratic inside, you don't feel you need to calm down, you've not had enough of your own mind kind of thing. But from what people have said, there's kind of a stigma around people lose the personality, they lose themselves. Now, if anyone was to experience that they feel that their personality is changing, they feel like they don't speak as much, they're not humorous as much, ADHD medication doesn't change your personality. So if anyone experiences a side effects of they don't speak, they feel low in mood, insomnia, it's important that they speak to the prescriber because it's either could be too high, it could be not the right medication for them. There's so many different types. I just want to bring up as well where you mentioned about people who don't want to go, for a diagnosis. So when people realise that ADHD medication is a stimulant, they will start to use caffeine, nicotine for that stimulant because in that short space of time, they'll be able to focus. So people notice that they don't get an effect from caffeine. They feel relaxed, they don't feel stimulated. The only thing about that is you can't medicate ADHD with caffeine because you'll end up anxiety, jittery. There's a lot of negatives in caffeine and nicotine. It's nowhere near as strong as a stimulant. So then that'll create more issues down the line. So it's so important that people don't just drink coffee after coffee after coffee after coffee for the caffeine because it doesn't work. In the end, it won't work. It looks like you do that yourself because when I'm talking, you're like, I see your facial expression.
Well, I can have a filter coffee that's got 8 scoopfuls of like filter coffee and before bed, and I'll still go to
Yeah.
sleep. So
Mhm.
I have about 4 coffees in the morning, like filter coffees to but it doesn't really do anything to me. Like you say, I've had people literally have 2 swallows of a coffee I've made them and gone, I can't drink that because it's too strong and it's sending me
Yeah.
wappy. I'm like, oh, I don't know what you're on about. It's not having any effect on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
We do.
that's a very interesting point, actually.
Yeah, so we do find that a lot in people with unmanaged ADHD. Some people, they have caffeine and are too sensitive, they just go jittery. So some people with unmanaged ADHD, they can't say that there's no effect. So that's not really, we can't take that into account for leverage of a diagnosis or anything. It just shows that there's a little bit of brain, it's different in the brain that stimulates. My mind's gone completely blank. It just shows that your brain is different to mine in terms of stimulation and caffeine.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing. It's just working out that there is a difference there, and it's the learning side that I've always found really, really difficult. Classroom stuff. My whole life, and you would have probably seen umpteen amount of people the same. That learning, you know, when you're in that classroom, I look around at people are taking it in and asking questions. I ain't got a clue what's going, and I found this really frustrating throughout my life. Learning in a classroom, yet you go out, you know, show me how to use a weapon. You go out and show me physically how to use it. I'll pick it up like that. I just can't learn in a classroom. Is that a common trait of it as well?
Yeah. So, for example, that's back to the low dopamine. So, if you're in, what subject did you not like when you were at school?
All of them. PE I liked.
So you like PE because it was active, it helps with your excess energy, etc. If you're in a maths class or English, you can't, it's not, and now ADHD, it doesn't mean that you can't focus. You can focus, but it's the distractibilities that take over the focus. So you'll become a lot more distracted by other things, and then you're missing what's going on, or you feel like you're being spoken at. So I could speak to you about something to do with an English lesson, and it's likely that you can't retain it because you're not interested. It's not stimulating enough. Now, if it's something that you enjoy, for example, if someone come in with a gun, for example, you could probably tell me every single thing on the gun, take it apart, put it back together at the age of like 7, because it's a hyper focus, it's an interest. You stimulate the kind of thing, your dopamine raises, and that's it. It's got you then.
Yeah. So is this something that's happening in schools? Do you think that, because I feel like it's fairly, I don't know what the percentage is. You might be able to tell me what the percentages of people in society and school kids that have, you know, diagnosed ADHD. And I've always said before, the schooling system. So for people that have ADHD, it's not geared at, you're just kind of told, I left school with no qualifications, zero
Yeah.
GCSEs, not because I think I'm intelligent. Other people will probably tell you different, but not because I'm like, you know, I don't have, but just because of that focus and lack. My school reports, and again, you would have probably heard this throughout, were doesn't pay enough attention, easily distracted, constant fidgeting, those sort of things. But you know, when I'm 45 now, that we're going back to this sort of 80s. It was just, I was hyperactive, was what I was labelled as, and naughty and lack discipline. So, is there anything that's happening in schools now? Obviously, the research and the knowledge seems to be there, but what's kind of, do you know what's being put in place now for that sort of thing? I know it's not really your area, so to speak, but
No, no, no. So there is a lot going into ADHD, for example, the research. So, where you've just mentioned hyperactivity. So, years ago, a young boy, for example, who was bouncing around the classroom, now he's an obvious sign of hyperactive ADHD. There's also, so there's 3 different types of ADHD. There's inattentive ADHD, hyperactive ADHD, and combined type, which means you've got both. So, for example, I've come across in my personal, not in my professional point of view, there's been people who have not seeked a diagnosis for ADHD because they academically excelled, they achieved. So they think, well, how can I do it if I've got ADHD? So I mustn't have ADHD, because they don't feel like they're bouncing around. So what you'll find is, and again with girls as well, inattentive ADHD in school gets missed a lot. Now that's because they daydream, they don't bring attention to themselves, but that's just the same as the hyperactivity. It can cause the same, not amount of damage, but the same struggles, you know, later on in life. So that's why I feel like it's important to get the word across, because I personally feel like veterans, girls, people with inattentive ADHD, and women in menopause, it's not really known about enough, and that's why a lot of people are struggling.
yeah, it seems to be, like you say, and I think the research is there now, and that's probably why it appears like everybody has it. Social media again does that. It appears like every other kind of person has come out and like they joke. There's a lot of joking about it and that, which is like, it is what it is. We live in a world. I've got a very
Yeah.
dark sense of humor anyway, but it also, it's like you know, we talk about the superpower bit, don't we? But I did read that sort of certain percentage, a massive percentage of entrepreneurs or high-powered business owners have
Yeah.
ADHD. What is the reason? Why is that such a great driver? Is it just a hyper focus thing, or
So it is more the hyper focus, realistically, because you can get a lot done. It's the thinking outside the box, the creativity. One of the negative in unmanaged ADHD, a negative of hyperfocus is you forget to eat, you forget to go to the toilet, your whole day can go past you. You could have a family and you just completely, because you're zoned in, not on around, you get done. So that can be a negative in unmanaged ADHD, but in managed ADHD, hyperfocus is massive, and you can do so much. It can be classed as a superpower. If ADHD is managed, it can change your life. It can be brilliant.
That is something I'm definitely going to go down, and we'll chat off here, and hopefully you'll be able to
Yeah,
point me in the kind of right direction of where I need to go moving forward. Because
yeah,
yeah, I don't. It's not like I find it like I struggle with it. I really don't now because I understand it. But I think for anyone out there, again, if they are
yeah,
kind of struggling with that, they need to kind of reach out and sort of certainly get rid of that struggle. When it comes down to everything I talk about mental health, is I'm trying to break down them stigmas around all these things where people don't want the label, they don't want to use it as an excuse. I don't use it as an excuse. I do jokingly when I'm doing stuff. I'll be like, well, that's ADHD for you. That's why I'm doing that. And it'll be why
yeah,
I've got the washing machine half empty, half a sandwich made, the fridge open, and I've half cut the lawn. But
yeah,
it's kind of, you know what I mean? I try and get rid of the stigmas around them. And this is, a great way to do it by talking to someone like yourself. So I want to, obviously we've touched on the ADHD. I'm not finished on that yet, but I want to
yeah.
know about like my mental health in general. And I feel like you're a good person to talk because you're around that, you're in that industry or that kind of profession. It seems like it's at crisis point through various different walks of life. Why do you think that is at present? It seems to be huge, doesn't it?
Yes. From a professional point of view, I would say it's because mental health is everyone knows about it now. For example, years ago, men wouldn't speak about mental health. There was a lot of stigma, or if you had anxiety, depression, you wouldn't talk about it. But there's a lot of awareness of it now, and I personally feel like we just don't have the resources for the capacity. There's
Yeah,
a lot of people, so it is very sad in that, but then it's also a positive that everyone can recognise it in themselves, because even if you can't get in to see your GP, you can start doing things yourself then to help yourself
yeah,
because you're
yeah.
aware of it.
Yeah. No, I do, and I'm no expert in any of these things, but like through my own experiences and through people that I know, there is a lot to be said from getting out there and getting in fresh air, not dwelling, not sitting, not stagnating, having a task, having a challenge, setting yourself goals and then having that routine, I think those things are little things that you can do to kind of help kind of while you're going down the route of kind of seeking help. But I still think if you are struggling with anything like that, and anything where you're thinking about taking your own life, or you can't see another way out, you need to speak out. You need to speak to anyone. I say it all the time. Like, I am no expert, but I can listen. I can talk. I might bore you to tears with podcast stuff, or kind of whatever. But at least there's an outlet there, and we see it again. While since we've planned this podcast over the last 2 or 3 days, you know, there's been 2 people or 3 people on social media, veterans, one who was a firefighter and a veteran from the RAF, and one, sadly, yesterday, you may have seen a serving soldier that disappeared. And sadly, yesterday evening, his body was found. And
Yeah.
it's just happening all too common, especially in the veterans community as well. As a whole, I think in the male community, was that something you'd kind of agree with?
100%, because even when I speak to Brad about it, I feel like for veterans, it's so sad because veterans, from my experience, I feel like veterans more have the mindset from years ago of I'll deal with it myself. I feel like veterans don't want to put people out when it comes to mental health, when really they're the ones who have fought for the country, they've got trauma, PTSD, they could have TBI, they could have unmanaged ADHD. There's a lot that would have been masked, and then as soon as they come out, everything falls apart. How many veterans do you know, Chris, who have left the army, they're then homeless, substance misuse, the marriage has broken down, they've lost the house? It happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
So
And
a message that I would like to get across is, if any veteran is got the diagnosis of PTSD, you can have PTSD and ADHD together. If they've got a diagnosis of PTSD and they've had treatment for it, but yet they're still struggling with the same symptoms of organisation, relationships, they turn to substance misuse. I would definitely recommend that you go back to your GP and just ask for more assessments, whether it be mental health, neurodevelopmental disorders, because if you've got unmanaged ADHD, that will jeopardise the PTSD recovery. And I feel like that's where there's a bit of a gap, because then once they've had the PTSD treatment, it's like, but you've had the treatment and then it's still the same. Substance misuse may heighten. Suicide rates in veterans are quite high. And I feel like personally, ADHD needs to be brought a lot more into the veteran world.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, that's why I thought, about chatting to you when I was put in touch with you by your fellow. I just think it'd be brilliant to, again, because I feel, and you've kind of alluded to that as well, that it's big in the veterans community. And I think because we seek that adrenaline, I feel like there's a lot of firefighters probably the same sketch as well, because they seek adrenaline for the dopamine. Every job I've ever done, and a lot of people I work with, every job they've ever done has seek that adrenaline kind of thing. So, yeah, it. Go on,
But
sorry.
you're saying that, Chris, I just wanna just mention about that. So where you mentioned about your seek adrenaline. So for some, just say you're on the battlefield. I don't know what you call it, but you know what I mean. So there's two soldiers. One's got unmanaged ADHD. One's not got ADHD. Now, if you've got unmanaged ADHD, you're more likely to do impulsive behaviours, risky behaviours. So you're more likely then to see a lot more trauma, with hence PTSD.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because of the kind of nature of your brain, also probably being a bit more inquisitive, or you're putting yourself in positions where
100%.
you know, because it's weird. It's like a lot of people, if I go to incidents now without going into detail for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
like people will go, I don't want to go and see there. I see that. My conscious, my brain gets the better of me, where it's almost like I want to go and look, not for like morbid curiosity, just because that's how
Yeah.
my brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And that is quite common with people who have ADHD. It's
Uh,
curiosity.
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So to finish off with, so for anyone that's struggling with mental health in general, obviously we know there's not necessarily everything in place to cater for people. It is a bit of an epidemic.
Yeah.
Where could you signpost people where they can get? And I mean, what we see, and there's a lot of charities set up now where
Yeah.
you can say that you're struggling. We see it with homeless veterans. We see it people that have had some form of breakdown. It's fine saying, well, we'll have something available for you in 3 months. But where can people go to get that instant help when they need it immediately?
See, that it's a bit of a catch-22 because the resources are so low. It's quite difficult. There is, as you say, there's the charities. So, for example, there'll be where people go, have a coffee, you speak about mental health, things like that. Because of the limited resources, it's more about get yourself on the path to see your GP, see whatever it is, whether it be mental health. If it's ADHD, go to an ADHD drop-in kind of thing. But it's so important as well that it's more small changes can make a big difference. If you go and do like one small thing for yourself, it can help. The more you do for yourself as well, the more you'll feel a little bit better. Unless if you're feeling suicidal or you're feeling low or it's coming to a point where it's significantly affecting your life, it's so important you see your GP. If you can't get in with your GP, it's A&E, because the more you leave it, you don't want to end up with someone who's suicidal and then they just leave it because there's no resources. Just go to A&E. Because at the end of the day, when people are feeling so low and the suicide ideation comes in, they're making plans, etc. Again, executive dysfunction goes, they can't make decisions, they can't like rationalise things, and then they don't see that suicide it's permanent for a temporary like problem. They can't see no way out. So I would definitely suggest it's more, if it's not suicide, it's more self-help, educate yourself. Psychoeducation, there's a lot of education now. Take some time for yourself because everyone's life is so busy. Now, even if you just start taking an hour a week for yourself for something that you like to do, that'll make a difference. Self-talk, positive talk, it will make a difference. And reach out to people in the same situation as you. As I say, the drop-ins, they significantly help.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, absolutely brilliant advice there, Amanda. And what I will do as well is I do know of a few charities, obviously through the podcast and through people that have kind of reached out, asked me to share stuff and everything else. I'll put the links into, there's some charities there that where you can get immediate help. Literally, you can phone a number and they will get you immediate help there and there. And I'll put those charities in the bio
Yeah.
at the end. But is there
So,
any
for
other points?
example, make
Sorry.
sure you put Mind and Samaritans, definitely put them in. Around ADHD, there's ADHD Foundation. Put them in as well because they are quite well known.
Okay, I will do. Is there any other points you want to touch on before we finish? I think we've covered about everything there is to do with. Obviously, we've touched on mental health, but we've touched on ADHD because that was the point of the podcast. Is there any other points that you'd like to kind of finish off with, or?
What I just would like to say is, for people who are struggling, it is so important that you do go and get the help. Don't, whether you're male, female, don't just leave it and feel, oh, I'll sort it out myself, because if it's the chemicals in your brain, it's likely not. Sometimes it could be that you need medication or you need IAPT, that's counselling services, CBT, EMDR, things like that. It's so important that people do continue to seek help, even though it's quite hard to get in with your GP. Just keep pushing forward because it's there for a reason. Don't feel like you can't get help.
No, awesome stuff, awesome advice. Thank you very much. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Amanda. Thank you for taking the time to come on. I will chat with you in a second off air, but again, thank you very much for taking the time to go through and kind of give an explanation, and hopefully this will help, you know, people kind of have a bit of understanding and certainly signpost them where they need to go and what they need to do, or certainly
Yeah.
just tips there that can help you manage it a bit better if you don't want to go down the official diagnosis route. So thank you very much.
Now, can I just say thank you for having me on as well? And I'm sorry, Chris, if I did speak over you or interrupt, because I do get dead excited when
No,
it
no,
comes to
don't
like
worry.
ADHD. I apologise.
It's not. It's nice to see that someone's really, really passionate about their chosen profession. And no, please, it's usually me that does the talking over with the ADHD. I have learned to manage that as I've gone on with the podcast, because I'm literally like that, and I'm waiting for a gap. But no, it's kind of no. Honestly, thank you very much for taking time to come. I really, really appreciate it. You take care and have a great day, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Hit the ground, no sound but the wind jumped out the sky where the real work begins. Iraq heat, cold steel on the front line, security tight, walking edge of a landmine. Somali seas, deck slick with the salt, eyes sharp, never blink, never halt. Surveillance in the mist, eyes on the prize. UK streets to foreign skies, from fire calls to bare knuckle rings, still fighting demons that memory brings. Oh, Kevin, tune in now, feel the truth get louder. This is the old paratrooper, no powder, no script, no mask, no lies, just facts. Mental health raw in boots or slacks, ADHD to the PTSD pain. We're breaking silence, not playing games. Old paratrooper podcast, stay locked in. Stories from the edge where the healing begins. Not a saint, just a voice for the ones who never had a fucking choice. From the wire to the ward, from smoke to the dark, every scar on the soul is a battle mark. Memories haunting, can't shake the past, but together we fight, we stand steadfast. Loud engines roar, feel the thunder, every story shared we tear asunder.